You've wandered into the quiet part of the night, where even the air feels heavy, and the silence listens back. Tonight, we're walking through forgotten ground. Graveyards. The kind of places where names fade, but secrets don't. These aren't ghost tales for comfort or campfire thrills. They're stories whispered by those who work among the stones, and sometimes by what's still beneath them. The caretaker who heard his own name echo through static. The grave that moved overnight. The door that should have stayed sealed under a tombstone. Each one is true, or close enough that you'll wish it wasn't. These stories feel different, because they don't just stay in the dark. They wait, quietly, until you close your eyes. Most people listen, get a chill, and scroll on without subscribing. But not you, right? Tell me, what time is it where you are right now? And where are you watching from? Type it in the comments. I'll be reading now. Take a breath. Turn off the lights if you dare. Here are tonight's encounters. Let's begin. The ground shouldn't have moved like that. Not in a graveyard. Not beneath my feet. It was just a soft shift, like the earth exhaled under the weight of my boots. I froze mid-step, the flashlight trembling in my hand, catching streaks of fog curling between the crooked headstones. The beam caught a spiderweb glistening on a cracked marble cross, then drifted toward the far corner where the soil looked fresh. That's what stopped me. Fresh dirt in an old graveyard. I was there because of a dare. A stupid one. My cousin Nate bet me $50 I wouldn't spend an hour inside the old Willow Creek Cemetery alone after midnight. He even timed me. Sent me in with a stopwatch app running on my phone, laughing as I climbed the rusted gate. "Don't let the caretaker catch you, or he'll bury you for real," he'd said, grinning like it was all a joke. But now, 40 minutes in, I wasn't laughing anymore. The air was colder here, near the back rows where the headstones leaned and sank into the ground like melting teeth. Every step sounded wrong, too soft, like walking on sponge instead of soil. I remember thinking the grass shouldn't be wet. It hadn't rained in days, and then came that shift underfoot. I knelt down, pressing my hand to the dirt. It wasn't just damp. It pulsed faintly, like something breathing under there. I snatched my hand back so fast I dropped my flashlight. The light spun across the ground and stopped against a tombstone. The name carved on it was Elias Warren, 1897-1922. The letters were shallow, worn down, almost erased. But the stone wasn't what scared me. It was what I saw beneath it. The base of the tombstone wasn't flush with the ground. There was a small gap, maybe half an inch, running along the front edge. And through that gap I could see a faint glint of metal, something man-made under there. I crouched closer, my breath fogging in the beam of light. The smell hit first, wet stone, rust, and something faintly sweet like rotting flowers. I tried to steady my hand and pushed the flashlight lower. Yeah, there it was, a strip of dull iron. Looked like the edge of a hinge. I sat back, heart hammering. "You've got to be kidding me," I whispered. "A door." There was a damn door under the tombstone. For a few seconds I just knelt there, trying to convince myself it was something else. Maybe the old caretaker had used metal reinforcements to keep the stone upright. Maybe it was part of a crypt. But the longer I looked, the clearer it got. The stone wasn't fixed. It was sitting on top of something rectangular, like a lid. The wind picked up, rustling the dry weeds. I could hear the cemetery gate creak in the distance, that long, dragging metal-on-metal sound. My phone buzzed in my pocket, making me jump so hard I nearly fell backward. It was a text from Nate. "Half hour left, bro. Still alive?" I didn't answer. My hands were shaking too badly. I thought about leaving. I really did. But curiosity has a way of sinking its claws in, especially when fear's already chewing at your ribs. I found myself brushing away loose dirt, my fingers cold and numb. The soil gave easily, too easily. Someone had disturbed it recently. After a minute, my fingers caught the edge of the slab.
Heavy, cold stone.
It shouldn't have moved. But when I pushed, just a little, it shifted. A deep grinding noise rolled out, muffled but real. My heart thudded so hard I thought it might echo. I glanced around the dark rows of graves, whispering, Okay, just stop." I wanted to believe it was a loose foundation, but there was that metallic edge again, glinting like a hinge catching moonlight. Another shove, harder this time. The tombstone tipped just enough to reveal a gap big enough to slip my fingers through. And beneath it, a rectangular outline of dark metal. A hatch, the handle was rusted, almost black. Every instinct in me screamed, "Don't touch it," but my hand was already moving. My fingers brushed cold iron, slick with dew. The chill went straight up my arm. I swear I felt a vibration like the faint hum of a generator or maybe a breath. I froze. Listened. The graveyard was silent except for the wind. But under that silence, I thought I heard something else. A faint tick. 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 Like a clock or footsteps. I pulled my hand back, breathing fast. "Nope," I said out loud, because sometimes talking to yourself is the only way to stay grounded when your brain starts to slip. "Nope, not doing this." I stood, wiped my hands on my jeans, and turned toward the gate. That's when I saw the caretaker's shack light turn on. It was at the far end of the cemetery, near the entrance. I hadn't seen anyone when I came in, but now the small cabin glowed with weak yellow light. The window blind shifted like someone had just looked out. "Shit," I whispered. Nate's words came back. "Don't let the caretaker catch you." I switched off my flashlight and crouched behind a headstone, heart in my throat. The light stayed on for maybe 20 seconds, then clicked off again. Silence. Then, the faint creak of a door opening, footsteps on gravel. Slow, deliberate, coming my way. I ducked lower, trying to stay still, but every breath sounded too loud. The air smelled damp and metallic now. The wind had stopped. Even the insects were quiet. The footsteps stopped. I held my breath. Then a voice drifted out from the dark. Old, hoarse, almost whispering. "You shouldn't be here." I felt my stomach drop. It wasn't angry, it was tired. Like someone stating a fact they'd said too many times before. I didn't answer. I couldn't even move. The footsteps came closer, crunching the gravel softly. A figure appeared between the rows, tall, hunched, carrying a lantern. The light swayed in slow arcs, throwing long, thin shadows over the graves. I could just make out his face, pale, creased, eyes like whetstones. He stopped near the Warren tombstone, right over the hatch. My pulse roared in my ears. He looked down at it, then turned his head slowly toward the stone I was hiding behind. "I know you're there," he said. Something inside me snapped. I bolted. I ran through the graves, ducking and weaving between monuments. My boots slipped on the damp grass. The beam of my flashlight jerked wildly as I sprinted toward the fence. Behind me, the caretaker shouted, low, angry, but still calm in that way that made it worse. "Don't open what you can't close." I didn't look back. I climbed the gate so fast I nearly ripped my jacket. My phone buzzed again, Nate calling this time, but I ignored it. I hit the ground running. Didn't stop until I reached my car parked along the old road. When I finally looked back, the cemetery was dark again. No lantern, no caretaker, no sign of movement. I drove home shaking so badly I almost crashed twice. I should have left it at that. Should have collected my $50 and moved on. But when I told Nate what I saw, the metal hatch, the caretaker, the voice, he laughed it off. Said I was probably seeing things in the dark. "Dude, the guy's ancient," Nate said. "He probably came out because he heard you digging around. You probably almost broke a sprinkler pipe or something." "Sprinkler pipes don't have handles," I snapped. He shrugged. "Whatever, man. You lasted the hour. You win." I took the money, but it didn't feel like a win. That night I kept hearing that voice in my head. "You shouldn't be here." Over and over, like a whisper behind my thoughts. By morning, I'd convinced myself to let it go. But when I checked my phone later, I noticed something weird. The stopwatch app hadn't stopped when I left the cemetery. I must have forgotten to hit it. But instead of showing an hour or two, it read 8:37, 12, 8 hours, 37 minutes, 12 seconds, meaning it kept running until the battery died sometime after I was home. I remember thinking, okay, weird glitch, whatever. But then I noticed the location tag below the timer. It said, "Active location, Willow Creek Cemetery." My stomach turned. The app thought my phone was still there. 2 days passed. I didn't sleep much. I kept dreaming about that hatch. In one dream, I was back in the graveyard, kneeling in the cold dirt. The tombstone was gone, the hole wide open, blacker than anything I'd ever seen. I heard dripping like water hitting metal, and something moving down there, slow and heavy. Every time I woke up, I could swear I heard a faint tick. Tick, tick in my room. By the third night, I broke. I needed to see it again just to prove it wasn't real. To prove I'd imagined it, I told Nate I was going back. He said I was insane, but when I reminded him of the money, he agreed to come, just to film it. We drove out around 1 a.m. The fog was thick that night, heavy enough that the headlights looked like smeared paint. The air smelled like rain and iron. The cemetery gate was locked, but Nate climbed over first, holding the camera phone in his teeth, whispering, "This is gonna be epic, man." I wasn't so sure. Everything looked different. The trees leaned closer. The moonlight barely reached the ground. My boots sank deeper into the soil than before. We moved quietly through the rows, our flashlights cutting thin cones through the mist. I tried to remember exactly where the Warren grave was, but the layout felt off, like someone had rearranged the stones. Nate laughed softly behind me. "You sure it was this far back?" "Yeah, past that oak, I think." He zoomed the camera in on my face. "Say the line, bro. Say that we found a hidden door beneath a tombstone." "Shut up," I muttered, but I was smiling a little. It almost felt normal again, until we found it. The Warren tombstone was lying flat this time, face down in the dirt. Like someone had pushed it completely over, and beneath it, the hatch, wide open, a square hole gaping in the ground, edges lined with damp earth. A metal door lay beside it, half buried, covered in mud. The air around it smelled wrong. Stale, wet, sour. My light caught on a ladder descending into blackness. "I told you," I whispered. "I told you it was real." We didn't talk for the rest of the drive. The silence between us was thick, vibrating with something we couldn't name. The only sound came from Nate's shaky breathing and the low hum of the tires. When we finally pulled up to my house, neither of us moved. The headlights lit the garage door, and for a second I thought I saw something flicker across the reflection, like a shadow crossing behind us. But when I turned, there was nothing there. I told him to stay the night. I didn't want to be alone. He didn't argue. Inside, everything felt too quiet. The air was heavy, still carrying that faint metallic scent I thought I'd left behind at the cemetery. I checked every door and window twice before I finally sat on the couch. Nate was pale, sitting across from me, his hands still shaking. "That thing," he said finally. "What do you think it was?" I didn't have an answer. The question just hung there, heavy and useless. After a few minutes, he went to the bathroom. I sat in the dark, the glow of the TV reflecting off the window, and that's when I heard it again, tick, 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 faint. But unmistakable. I muted the TV. The sound stopped. When Nate came back, I asked, "You hear that?" He frowned. "Hear what?" "Ticking. Like a clock." He shook his head. "There's no clock in here, man." I wanted to believe him. I really did. But the sound came again, this time from the wall behind me. 3 short ticks, then silence. We didn't sleep that night. By sunrise, Nate looked worse. His skin had a gray tint, like he'd been drained. When I asked if he was okay, he just muttered, "Dreams." Couldn't shut it out. He left soon after, saying he needed to clear his head. That was the last time I saw him alive. 3 days later, his sister called me crying. Nate had been found in his car by the river. Engine off, doors locked. No sign of struggle, just gone. They said it looked like his heart stopped in his sleep. He was 24. At the funeral, I couldn't stop shaking. I told myself it was grief, but deep down I knew. Something had followed us. When they lowered his coffin into the ground, I swore I heard it again, the faint tick. Tick, tick from somewhere deep beneath the soil. I didn't tell anyone. Who would believe me? That night I went through the footage he'd recorded. The file was corrupted, half glitched, static tearing through most of it. But there was one short clip that played clean. It was from right before the caretaker appeared. The camera pointed into the open hatch. The image was grainy, black swallowing everything below the first few rungs. Then the audio picked up that faint whisper again. At first, I thought it said go down. But when I played it slower, frame by frame, I realized it wasn't saying that, it was saying come back. After that, things started breaking. Lights flickered even when the power was fine. My phone would ring once at 3:17 a.m. every night, always from an unknown number. If I answered, all I'd hear was breathing, slow, wet. One night I woke to the sound of dirt hitting my window. Soft at first, then harder, like someone was throwing handfuls. When I looked outside, the street was empty. But there were footprints in the yard. Deep, heavy ones. They led straight to the side of my house where they stopped, right beneath my bedroom window. That's when I decided to go back. Not out of courage. Out of exhaustion. Whatever it was, it wouldn't leave me alone. I went alone this time. The gate was open when I arrived. That's what scared me most. It had always been locked before. Fog rolled low over the ground, clinging to the tombstones like thin smoke. The caretaker's shack was dark. No light in the window. I walked slowly toward the back, flashlight shaking in my hand. The path was still there, the same one Nate and I had taken. When I reached the Warren grave, the tombstone was upright again. Perfectly upright. No sign of the hatch. For a moment, I thought maybe I'd imagined the whole thing. That trauma had warped the memory. But then I noticed the dirt, freshly turned again. I knelt down and brushed it away. The edge of the metal glinted beneath. My breath caught. The door was there, sealed shut this time, and someone had carved something into the stone above it. 4 words, rough and crooked, "Do not open again." I should have listened. I really should have. But my hands were already digging, scraping away the mud, the warnings, the fear. It only took a few minutes before I found the handle again. Cold as ever. When I pulled, it didn't resist. The hatch opened with a sigh like it had been waiting. The smell hit me instantly. Wet earth, metal, something old and sour. I gagged, covering my nose. My flashlight beam caught the ladder, descending into pure black. This time I didn't hesitate. I started climbing. The air grew colder with every rung. My breath fogged out in front of me, disappearing into the dark. The metal under my hands felt damp, sticky, almost warm in places. After maybe 20 feet, my boots hit solid ground. I turned slowly, flashlight cutting through a low concrete tunnel. It wasn't a crypt. It looked more like an old bunker. The walls were lined with rusted pipes. Water dripped from the ceiling in steady rhythms. Drip, drip, tick. That sound again. I followed it, one slow step at a time. The tunnel stretched farther than it should have, curving slightly to the left. My light flickered, catching glimpses of markings on the walls. Scratches, words half smeared in dirt. I wiped one clean with my sleeve. It read, "It talks like us." Another, "It remembers." My stomach knotted. Far ahead, something glimmered faintly. A second door, smaller, metal again. I reached it and hesitated. The handle was covered in rust and something darker. I pressed my ear to the cold surface. Silence. Then a faint sound, like breathing, slow and uneven. When I pulled back, I realized my reflection in the metal wasn't matching me. It blinked half a second later. I stepped back hard. My flashlight slipped from my hand, clattering to the floor. The beam spun wildly, hitting the walls. That's when I saw the writing around the door. A circle of carved words repeated over and over. "Keep it sleeping." A low creak echoed from the other side. I turned and ran. My boots splashed through the puddles, breath coming in short, ragged bursts. The tunnel seemed longer now, stretching, twisting. I couldn't see the ladder anymore. Just endless dark. Behind me, something moved. Wet steps dragging, scraping, tick, tick, tick. It wasn't mechanical. It was organic, like the sound of joints popping in slow motion. I pushed harder, nearly slipping. My light flickered again and then went out. Darkness swallowed everything. I kept running blind until my hands slammed into the ladder. I climbed fast, metal biting into my palms. I didn't look down, didn't breathe, didn't stop until I burst out of the hatch into the cold air. The moon was high, the fog thicker than ever. I kicked the metal door shut and threw the tombstone slab back over it. It didn't fit perfectly, but it was enough. I backed away, shaking, covered in dirt and sweat. Then I heard it. 3 faint knocks from beneath the ground, tick, 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 and a voice. Muffled, familiar. Nate. I froze. It sounded just like him. He said my name again. Clearer this time. "Hey man, it's cold down here. Help me out, yeah?" My throat tightened. "You're dead," I whispered. A soft chuckle came from beneath the tombstone. "You shouldn't say things like that." "Not when I'm so close." The dirt shifted slightly. The slab trembled. I stumbled backward, tripping over a root. My flashlight landed nearby, beam rolling across the grass, and that's when I saw the caretaker standing a few feet away. He looked worse than before. His clothes hung in tatters, his skin gray, eyes blackened around the edges, but he wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the ground, "It's awake," he said quietly. I could barely speak. "What the hell is it?" He shook his head slowly. "It used to be one of us." Then he knelt beside the tombstone and began muttering something under his breath, pressing his hands flat to the stone. The ground shuddered. For a moment, I thought it was working. The trembling stopped. Then, without warning, something slammed from underneath with enough force to crack the slab in two. The caretaker flew backward. Landing hard, a thin, pale hand broke through the dirt. Then another. Each finger was too long, the nails dark and curved. The arms followed, slick with mud, veins pulsing faintly beneath translucent skin. The caretaker scrambled to his feet. "Run," he rasped. I didn't need to be told twice. I sprinted toward the gate, the sound of stone splitting and earth tearing behind me. The caretaker's voice echoed once more. "It finds what it remembers." I didn't look back until I reached the road. When I finally turned, the fog was rolling thicker, swallowing the entire cemetery. I couldn't see the caretaker anymore. Just movement, something tall and slow pulling itself out of the ground. Standing among the graves for one moment, its face caught the moonlight. It was Nate, or what was left of him, eyes empty, mouth slack but smiling. Then the fog closed over him, and everything went silent. It's been 3 weeks. I moved out of town. Burned my clothes, sold my car. I thought maybe distance would matter. But every night at 3:17 a.m. I still hear the ticking. Sometimes from the walls, sometimes under the floor, and last night I heard knocking at my front door. 3 soft taps. When I checked the peephole, no one was there. Just the porch light flickering. I turned away, but then the voice came. Low. Familiar. Right behind the door. "Hey man, it's cold out here." The first night I heard my name in the graveyard, I thought I was losing it. It was 3:17 a.m. That's when it always starts. I'd been the caretaker of Maple Hollow Cemetery for 11 years. My job was simple: keep the grounds clean, log new burials, lock the gates by midnight. Nothing fancy. I lived in the small brick caretaker's house by the entrance with the smell of soil and lilies as my constant roommates. It was lonely work, but peaceful. Until that night. I was doing my last walkthrough, flashlight in hand, boots crunching over the gravel path. The mist was sitting low, thick enough to swallow my ankles. The wind had died hours ago, but the trees still creaked. That slow wooden groan that sounds too close to a voice when you're tired. Then I heard it. Eli. Soft. Close. I froze. My flashlight beam jittered across the rows of headstones. "Who's there?" No answer. Just the faint hum of distant traffic and my own heartbeat thudding in my ears. I tried to laugh it off. Maybe a trick of the wind, maybe a late-night kid sneaking around. But when I turned toward the western plots, the air got colder. Heavy. That's where the old graves are. The ones with dates so worn you can't tell if they're from the 1800s or the early 1900s. The whisper came again. Eli. Longer this time. Dragging my name out like a sigh. I swung my light toward the sound. The beam caught on something pale near the tree line, a face or what looked like one, but it disappeared the second I blinked. I stood there for what felt like forever before I finally whispered, "Not funny." The cemetery stayed silent. I didn't tell anyone. Who would I tell? The sheriff already thought I was that weird night guy, but the next night it happened again, same time. Same voice. This time I was inside the caretaker's house, sitting at the kitchen table with my logbook open. The whisper came through the window. Clear as day. "Eli, help me." I dropped my pen. My heart started hammering. The window was closed, but the glass fogged over like someone had breathed against it from the outside. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped out onto the porch. The night was dead still. The fog hung thick and the moon was hidden behind it. My own breath sounded too loud. I scanned the rows of graves, moving the beam slowly from one stone to the next. Who's out there? Nothing. Then, just as I turned to go back inside, I saw it. A single lantern flickering at the far end of the cemetery, near plot 47. That lantern hadn't been lit in years. I hesitated. Every instinct told me to go inside, lock the door, and pretend I hadn't seen it. But the voice had said, "Help me." And I'd always told myself I wasn't the kind of man who ignored a cry for help, even if it came from the dark. By the time I reached plot 47, The fog was so thick I could barely see my own boots. The lantern sat on the ground beside a headstone, flame swaying faintly. The name on the stone was familiar. Margaret Lane, 1923 and 1941. I'd trimmed weeds around that grave earlier in the week. The ground beside it looked disturbed, like someone had dug and then refilled a small hole. I knelt down. "Who's there?" No response. Then the lantern flickered and I felt a breath of cold air brush the back of my neck. A voice, so soft I barely caught it. "You found me." I spun around. Nothing. Just the fog, endless and white. But when I turned back, the lantern was gone. Only a faint indentation in the wet grass remained, like something had been there moments before. The next morning I told myself it had to be exhaustion. I hadn't slept well in weeks. The isolation was getting to me. But as I poured my coffee, I noticed something strange. My front door was unlocked. I was certain I'd locked it the night before. I always did. Habit drilled into me after a decade of working here. When I stepped outside, I saw muddy footprints on the porch. Small ones. Bare. They led from the edge of the steps toward the path that cut through the western section of the graveyard. My stomach twisted. Over the next few nights, it got worse. Every time 317 rolled around, the whisper came, sometimes outside the window, sometimes from the hallway. Always the same voice. Always my name. The lights would flicker. The door would creak open an inch. My reflection in the window started lagging behind my movements by half a second. One night I tried to record it. I set my phone on the table, camera facing the window, and waited. At exactly 3:17, the temperature dropped so fast the breath froze in my throat. The whisper came again, right by my ear this time. "Eli, you left me here." I turned. Nobody. When I checked the recording the next morning, the video was dark until that exact second. Then the glass of the window turned black. Not shadow, not reflection. Just black, and faintly for less than a second. A face appeared in the reflection. Pale, female, eyes closed. Then the screen glitched and went dead. That's when I started digging. Not in the literal sense at first. I went through the records. Old burial logs, caretaker notes, anything I could find. There was a Margaret Lane buried in plot 47. 28 years old. Died of unknown causes. But there was something else. In the margins of the 1941 ledger, written in faded pencil, were 3 words, "Not fully buried." I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the window, shotgun across my lap, waiting for 3:17. When the whisper came, I whispered back, "What do you want?" No response. Just that faint, dragging breath circling the house, then a knock. 3 slow taps on the front door. I aimed the shotgun. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold it steady. "Who's there?" The doorknob turned. Once, twice. Then a whisper from the other side. "It's cold, Eli, please." I stepped back. The barrel lowered. I don't know why. Maybe because I heard something in her voice. Something human. The door creaked open on its own. Just an inch. The smell that came through wasn't right. Earth, flowers, decay. And behind it, a chill that felt like it went straight into my bones. I didn't tell anyone. Days blurred together. I barely left the house except to keep up appearances. Trimming grass, refilling flowers, avoiding plot 47 like it was poison. But she didn't stay in the graveyard anymore. Every mirror in the caretaker's house fogged up around that time each night. Sometimes words appeared. "Cold. Help. Listen." I tried moving to another room. I even covered the mirrors. It didn't matter. I'd wake up at 3:17, always hearing that faint whisper by my ear. "Please, dig." It went on like that for weeks, until one stormy night when everything broke. Rain hammered the roof. The wind was howling hard enough to bend the old trees sideways. The power went out around midnight, leaving only candlelight flickering across the kitchen walls. I'd given up trying to sleep. So I just sat there watching the storm. Then, through the thunder, I heard it again. Faint at first. Then louder. "Eli." I stood up slowly. My stomach was twisting itself into knots. "Eli, come to me." It was coming from outside, from the western plots, against every bit of sense I had left. I grabbed my flashlight and coat and stepped out into the storm. The wind tore at my face, rain soaking me instantly. The flashlight beam barely cut through the sheets of water. The whisper guided me, always just ahead, always just far enough that I had to keep walking. "Here," it said, "please." I stopped when I reached plot 47. The dirt was caving in like something underneath was pressing upward. Water filled the indentation, dark and muddy. My heart was pounding so loud it drowned the thunder. I knelt, digging at the wet soil with my hands. It didn't take long before I hit something solid. Wood. The coffin. My fingers scraped along the top until they caught on metal. The latch. "Eli," she whispered. "You can open it now." I froze. The rain blurred everything, running into my eyes. Lightning flashed, and for a split second I saw her standing just behind the grave. Not ghostly, not translucent, just wrong. Her face too pale, hair plastered to her cheeks, eyes wide and dark as the soil around her. I fell back hard, scrambling to my feet. Her mouth moved. No sound came out. Then her head tilted slowly and she whispered one last time, even though I didn't see her lips move. "You left me here." The ground gave way beneath me. I went down fast, the mud swallowing me up to my waist. My flashlight disappeared into the water. My hand slipped, clawing for something to grab. Then a hand, cold, small, brushed my arm from below. I screamed and kicked free, crawling backward through the mud until I hit solid ground. When I looked again, the grave was still. Just rainwater pooling where I'd been. She was gone. They found me the next morning sitting on the path, soaked, shivering, covered in mud. The sheriff asked what happened. I told him the storm had caused a collapse in one of the graves. He nodded. "You're lucky you didn't go all the way down. We'll send a crew to fill it back in." I asked which grave it was. He checked his clipboard. "Plot 47, Margaret Lane." I told him not to. I told him to seal it with concrete, salt it, whatever it took. He laughed it off, said, "It's a cemetery, Eli. We bury things here." That's the job. That was a year ago. They filled it back in. Poured a new headstone. It looks perfect now. But sometimes when the wind dies and the air turns cold, I still hear her. 17 a.m., every time, whispering from the western plots. Not angry anymore. "Just patient, Eli," she says. "You found me once. You'll dig again." And lately, the dirt near plot 47 looks disturbed, fresh. The roses shouldn't have been alive. Not in that kind of cold. It was late November when I went to visit my grandmother's grave. The ground was half frozen, the air so sharp it felt like breathing glass. The whole cemetery was colorless, dead leaves, gray stones, brittle grass crunching under my boots. Except for her grave. Right in the middle of all that frost, a bouquet of red roses stood perfectly fresh. At first I thought someone had left them recently. Maybe my mom, maybe one of my aunts. But when I knelt down and touched the petals, I realized they were growing out of the soil. No stems visible. Just roses blooming straight from the frozen ground. Their color too deep, too red. That's when I noticed the smell, sweet and heavy, like perfume left open too long. My grandma used to wear a scent just like it. I remember whispering, "Grandma," half joking, half scared, but there was no wind, no sound. Just the faint hum of distant traffic and my heart beating too fast. I reached down and plucked one of the roses, and the petal bled. It wasn't much, just a thin red line running down my fingers. At first I thought I'd cut myself on a thorn, but there weren't any. The petals were soft, warm even. I dropped it, stumbled back, and wiped my hand on my jeans. The smear was too thick, too dark to be sap. That's when I realized the blood wasn't mine. My hand wasn't cut. Something moved beneath the soil then, a small shift, like a bubble of air rising. The bouquet trembled. I stood there frozen, staring until I heard a low thump from below. It didn't sound like settling dirt. It sounded like knocking. Once, twice, slow. I ran. My grandmother's name was Catherine Marks, and she'd been dead for almost a year. We weren't close near the end. She'd gotten strange, talking to herself, warning us about the roots and the ones beneath. My mom said it was dementia. The doctors agreed, but I'd seen her in her final week. sitting up in her hospital bed, fingers digging into the blanket, whispering, "They come for those who forget." When I asked who, she just smiled and said, "The garden will remember me. We all thought it was just rambling until now." That night, I couldn't stop thinking about the roses. I told myself I'd imagined the bleeding. Maybe it was just frostbite or sap mixed with mud. Still, I couldn't sleep. Around 2:00 a.m., I caught myself scrolling through photos of her old garden, rows and rows of red roses that bloomed too early every spring. She'd called them her midnight bloomers. Said they liked the moon better than the sun. I used to think it was cute. Now it made my skin crawl. At 3:17 a.m., I woke up to the smell of her perfume. Heavy, sweet, old-fashioned. It drifted through my bedroom like invisible smoke. And when I looked at the window, I saw something move outside, just a flicker, a shape shifting through the yard. I tried to tell myself it was the wind or a stray cat, but when I looked again, I saw a smear of red on the glass. A fingerprint. Small. Familiar. The next morning, I drove back to the cemetery. The air was warmer, snow melting into slick puddles. Her grave looked different. The roses had spread. Half the plot was covered now, a carpet of deep red flowers twisting over the soil. The stone itself was cracked down the middle, roots pushing through like veins. Someone had scratched words into the marble. "She's growing again." I felt sick. There was no sign of footprints, no sign of anyone else. But the smell was even stronger now, thick enough to taste. And beneath the perfume, there was another scent, copper blood. I called my mom that afternoon. "Have you been to Grandma's grave recently?" "No," she said. "Why?" "There's something weird growing there." "Oh, she always did love her roses." "No, Mom. They're growing through the ground. It's not right." She went quiet for a long moment. "Don't go back there," she said finally. Her voice sounded smaller than I'd ever heard it. "Just leave it alone." When I asked why, she hung up. That night, I dreamed of the hospital room again. Grandma was sitting upright, pale and smiling, her hands folded neatly in her lap. The smell of roses filled the air. "You picked one," she said. I tried to answer, but my throat felt locked. She tilted her head. "Once you pick one, you have to plant one. That's how they remember." Then the floor began to pulse, the tiles cracking, roots snaking up from underneath the bed. They coiled around her arms, her neck, her face. But she didn't scream. She just kept smiling as they dragged her down. When I woke up, I could still smell the roses, and there was dirt under my fingernails. I told myself it was a dream. Until I checked my phone, I had a new voicemail. "No caller ID," I hit play. At first, it was just static. Then a faint voice, familiar, distant. "Did you like the flowers?" I dropped the phone. The voice was hers. I deleted the message, turned off the phone, threw it into the kitchen drawer. But even then, I could still hear her voice in my head. Soft, almost kind. "Plant one for me." By the next day, the roses had spread even farther. The cemetery staff put up yellow tape around the grave. They said the roots were breaking through nearby plots. The groundskeeper told me. Never seen anything grow that fast. Thought maybe a prank, but he trailed off, rubbing the back of his neck. "They're still blooming. Even with the frost," I looked at him. "Have you touched them?" He shook his head. "No way." One of the guys tried to cut a few down, but his hand split open after. Like something bit him. My stomach turned. "He okay?" He shrugged. "Hospitalized, infection." That night, the dreams came back. This time, I wasn't in the hospital. I was standing in the cemetery again, moonlight glinting off the roses. My grandmother was there, kneeling in front of her grave, humming softly. I called out to her. She turned. Half her face was soil. Her eyes were filled with roots. She smiled and said, "I told you they bloom for family." When I woke up, the smell was everywhere again. I went to the window. My yard was covered in roses. They'd grown overnight, up the fence, over the porch, creeping along the siding like veins. Their petals were redder than ever, and each one shimmered faintly in the dawn light. I grabbed my shovel and started tearing them out. But the more I cut, the faster they seemed to grow. By the time I reached the porch, my hands were bleeding from where the stems had sliced me, and that's when I noticed it. Every drop of blood that hit the ground grew a new bud within seconds. I called my mom again, panicking. She didn't answer, so I drove to her house. When she opened the door, the smell hit me like a wall. Her front yard was full of rose bushes, bigger, thicker, winding around the porch columns. The same deep red, the same impossible bloom. She looked tired, her eyes sunken. "You picked one, didn't you?" I nodded, she sighed. "Then it knows you now. What does that mean?" She glanced toward the backyard. She wanted to be remembered. She didn't want to be alone. When we buried her, the roots were already there. Roots? Mom nodded slowly. She planted them years before she died. Said they'd keep her here. Said they'd bring us closer. I felt cold all over. "You knew?" "She told me not to pick one," my mom whispered. "She said they take what they're owed." That night, I stayed with her. Around 3:17, we both woke up to the sound of creaking wood. The roses on the windowsills were moving, petals twitching like they were breathing. Their stems pressed against the glass, curling tighter, and under the sound of wind and glass I heard another noise, whispering, dozens of voices, all saying the same thing: plant one for her. The windows shattered. Roses poured through like a flood, twisting, crawling. The scent was suffocating. I grabbed my mom's hand, pulling her toward the hallway. She was screaming, but I could barely hear her over the cracking wood. The vines wrapped around my ankles, cold and slick. I kicked free and slammed the front door open. The porch was gone, just a field of red. Roses stretching endlessly into the night. They were pulsing, breathing, moving. Something was growing from the center of the yard. A shape rising out of the tangle. At first I thought it was another bush, but when it turned its head I saw her face. Grandma. Her mouth opened, roots spilling out like veins. "Family never leaves," she whispered. "Now neither will you." I don't remember how I got out. The next thing I knew, I was in my car, driving without direction. My clothes were shredded, my hands bleeding. My mom's house was gone by the time I looked back, just red, miles and miles of red. I drove until sunrise. When I finally stopped at a gas station, I stumbled inside, shaking, covered in dirt and petals. The cashier just stared. "Rough night?" he asked. I nodded, trying not to cry. "Do you smell roses?" He frowned. "No, man. You good?" I didn't answer, because the smell wasn't fading anymore. It's been 6 days. I'm staying in a motel outside town. I boarded up the windows. I burned the clothes I wore that night. But every morning there's a single rose lying on the nightstand. Perfect. Fresh. Still warm. I've tried throwing them away, burning them, tearing them apart. It doesn't matter. By nightfall they're back, and each time, they look redder. Last night I woke up to find a new one growing from the carpet beside my bed. When I touched it, the petals trembled and whispered, "Thank you. I haven't slept since this morning." I noticed something else. My fingernails have started to turn dark. The veins in my wrists look thicker, and when I cut my palm open to check just a small slice, the blood that came out wasn't red. It was deep crimson like syrup. It smelled like roses. I think I understand now what Grandma meant. She didn't want to be forgotten. She wanted to keep growing. And now, she's doing that through me, because when I sleep, I can feel her roots inside me, winding deeper, pulling toward the surface. She whispers sometimes. Midnight is almost here. The moment I stepped into the cemetery that night, I knew we'd made a mistake. It wasn't the kind of mistake you laugh about later. It was the kind that crawls into your chest and settles there, quiet, heavy, waiting. We were supposed to be shooting a student film, a short horror piece for a college project. Cheap cameras, fake fog, borrowed lighting rigs. Nothing serious until we found the mausoleum. There were 4 of us, me, Jake, Maya, and Trent, film majors. Broke, tired, desperate to make something good enough to pass. We'd picked St. Alden's Cemetery because it was out of town and technically abandoned. No new burials since the 80s, no caretakers, just open land and old stones. Perfect horror setting. We arrived around 9 p.m., just late enough for the fog to roll in, early enough that we could still pretend we weren't scared. Trent set up the tripod while Jake carried sound gear. Maya handled lighting. I had the script, cheap as hell, a group of friends, exploring an old graveyard and finding something they shouldn't. It was supposed to be funny, meta-horror, a parody. But that's not what we filmed. The first thing that felt wrong was the silence, no crickets, no wind, just dead air. Even the fog felt too thick, like it wasn't rolling naturally but clinging to us, refusing to move. Then Maya said, "Guys, what's that?" She was pointing past the last row of gravestones, where the ground sloped downward toward a patch of trees. At first I thought it was a small hill. Then my flashlight caught stone, gray, cracked, half buried in roots. It looked like a small building, maybe 8 feet tall, covered in moss and vines, a mausoleum. None of us had seen it listed on the maps. Trent grinned. "Oh, hell yeah, bonus set piece," Jake hesitated. "That thing looks condemned." "Exactly," Trent said. "Creepy gold. Let's grab a few shots," we all followed. Because that's what you do when you're 20, broke and trying to impress your film professor. The closer we got, the more it felt. Wrong, there was no door, just a slab of stone, carved with names that were too faded to read. The air around it smelled like iron and damp soil. Jake tapped the microphone, frowning. "I'm getting feedback." We hadn't turned anything on yet. Then I noticed something carved above the doorway, words so worn they were barely visible. Maya brushed the moss aside. "What's it say?" I leaned in with the flashlight. "We keep what we are given." My stomach tightened. Trent laughed. "Creepy. Let's start rolling." We filmed for maybe an hour. Simple shots. Establishing angles, reaction takes, fake screams. But the longer we were there, the more the footage started glitching. Not in post. Live. Every time the camera panned across the mausoleum, the screen flickered with static. Faces blurred. Sometimes a shadow passed that didn't belong to any of us. "Battery's dying fast," Maya muttered, checking the rig. "It was full 10 minutes ago." Jake said, "I told you this place is messed up." Trent just grinned, because of course he did. "That's good. Found footage vibes. Let's keep going." But when he tried to get a close-up of the door, the lens cracked, a clean diagonal line, no impact. No reason. We all froze. Then faintly from inside the mausoleum, a sound. 3 knocks. Slow. Heavy. Like someone on the other side wanted out. Jake backed away instantly. "Nope, no. That's not wind," Maya whispered. "Could it be an animal?" Trent was still recording. "Guys, come on, this is insane footage." I stepped closer before I could stop myself. The air got colder. My flashlight dimmed, then flickered out completely. That's when I heard it. A voice. Low. Muffled. Coming from behind the stone. It wasn't words at first, just the rhythm of breathing. Then faintly, "Who keeps me?" The sound crawled through me. I could feel it in my teeth, vibrating in my skull. I stumbled back, shaking my head. "Let's go." "I'm serious, Trent, let's go." He hesitated, and for once unsure. But before any of us could move, the ground under the camera shifted. A patch of soil caved in near the base of the structure, revealing a narrow gap, just wide enough for a person to squeeze through. Jake swore under his breath. "That's a crypt entrance," Maya said. "We're not going down there." Trent grinned again, but it looked forced. One shot, one look. "We get this on film, we'll ace the project." I should have said no, but he was already kneeling by the hole, pointing the camera into the dark. "See? Nothing there. Just stairs?" He lowered the camera farther, trying to get an angle. Then the viewfinder glitched again, a static distortion, a flash of something pale moving below. A hand. It reached up fast. I don't remember screaming, but Maya did. The camera hit the ground. The lens shattered completely this time. Trent stumbled back, staring into the hole. Something grabbed it. I swear. But when we looked, the hole was gone. Filled. Sealed like it had never been open. We ran. All of us. Back to the van, breath clouding, hearts hammering. None of us spoke until we were miles away. When we finally stopped, Trent started laughing. Not normal laughter. The kind that sounds like you're trying to convince yourself you're fine. "It's just footage," he said. "That's all it is." But when we checked the camera, the footage was gone. Every file corrupted. Every clip replaced with the same 4 seconds. A single frame of the mausoleum door, slightly open, and a whisper on loop. "We keep what we are given." We swore to forget it. We told each other we'd never go back. But of course, that didn't last. A week later, Trent called me at 2 a.m. His voice was shaky. "Manic, dude, I went through the footage again. There's something new." I sat up in bed. "What do you mean, new?" You said it was corrupted. It was. But not anymore. It fixed itself. Trent, don't. He cut me off. There's a person in it. Standing in front of the door. Looks like you. My skin went cold. Send it to me. He hesitated. It won't send. Every time I try, the file disappears. You just need to see it in person. I hung up. He called again. 10 times by morning, I'd blocked his number. 2 days later, campus security found his car parked outside St. Alden's Cemetery. The door was open, keys still in the ignition. His phone was on the seat. The camera was gone. They never found Trent. When I heard the news, part of me wanted to pretend it wasn't connected, but the nightmare started immediately. Every night I saw that mausoleum door. Every night I heard the same voice. Who keeps me? Sometimes I'd wake up to find dirt under my fingernails. Once my bedsheets smelled like whetstone and moss. Maya and Jake wouldn't talk to me anymore. They stopped answering texts. I can't blame them, but last night someone slid a flash drive under my apartment door. No note. No name. When I plugged it in, there was only one video file. Mausoleum 2 MP4. The footage started with static, then cut to the cemetery. Nighttime. Trent was holding the camera. His breathing was shaky. I came back, he whispered. I had to. He turned the lens toward the mausoleum. The door, the solid slab of stone rumwood, was open now. Wide open. A set of steps descended into darkness. He walked forward, each footstep echoing louder than the last. Then he turned the camera toward himself. I think it's calling me. The frame glitched, his face distorted. For half a second, it wasn't Trent anymore, it was me. That's when the file ended. No fade out, no sound, just abrupt silence. My reflection in the laptop screen didn't move for a second after I did. Then it smiled. I haven't slept since. And tonight, I can hear something outside my apartment door. 3 knocks, slow, heavy. Like someone on the other side wants to know if I remember. I didn't open the door that night. I couldn't. But I didn't sleep either. I sat on the couch, lights on, staring at my apartment door like a man waiting for it to start breathing. Every now and then I thought I heard something, a faint scraping like stone against stone. By sunrise, the sound stopped. The knocking never came again, but I knew it wasn't over, because when I checked my laptop, the video file was gone. In its place was a single image, a still frame, the mausoleum. Door wide open, and someone standing inside it. Me, I tried deleting it. The file wouldn't move. Wouldn't rename. Wouldn't open. It just sat there, gray and heavy on the desktop like a digital tombstone. I yanked the laptop's plug out of the wall and slammed the lid shut. But even with the power off, I could still hear the faint hum. The kind electronics make when they're still running something unseen. That's when I decided I had to go back. The drive to St. Alden's felt endless. It was early evening, rain chewing up the horizon, the world around me sinking into that dull gray that looks like it's waiting for something bad to happen. I told myself I just needed closure, to see it again in daylight, to prove there was nothing supernatural about it. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. It had called me back, the same way it called Trent. The gates were chained now, but the fence was low enough to climb. I parked a mile down the road and walked in through the fog. The air was thick, heavy, the kind of quiet that makes your ears ring. When I reached the western side of the cemetery, I almost didn't recognize it. The ground was uneven. Patches of fresh dirt and cracked stones scattered everywhere. Several headstones were missing, but the mausoleum was still there, and the door was open. It wasn't supposed to open. We'd seen it sealed, solid. But now the slab of stone leaned against the side, covered in wet moss and fingerprints that weren't quite human-sized. The smell hit me first. Damp earth, metal, something old and sweet, like rotting flowers. I pointed my flashlight into the darkness. Stone steps led downward, steeper than I remembered, slick with condensation, and carved into the walls, faint but legible this time, were words running in a spiral down into the dark. We keep what we are given. The same phrase we'd seen before. But the further I went, the newer the carvings looked. Sharper, deeper, as if they'd been added recently. I should have stopped. But once you start down a staircase like that, turning back feels impossible. Every step sounded like it was echoing into something enormous. The air got colder. My flashlight started to dim again, even with fresh batteries. Then the stairs ended. The tunnel opened into a circular chamber lined with stone shelves, each holding what looked like urns, or what used to be urns. Most were shattered, and scattered among the debris were things that didn't belong underground. A camera tripod, a cracked phone, a film reel, Trent's backpack. I knelt and pulled it open. Inside were his notes, his camera log, and a single scrap of paper torn from his notebook. On it, written in frantic, smeared ink, "It doesn't want to be filmed. It wants to remember." The walls began to breathe. Not move. Breathe. The surface rippled like something underneath was expanding and contracting. I stumbled backward, knocking over one of the shattered urns. Ash poured out thick and wet, clinging to my shoes. That's when the voice came again. Low. Close. Too close. "Who keeps me?" I froze. My flashlight flickered, then went out completely. The dark was absolute. Then, faintly, the sound of bare feet against stone. Coming closer. "Trent?" I whispered before I could stop myself. The sound paused, then, "You shouldn't have come." It was his voice. Or at least it tried to be. There was something wrong with the tone, like it was coming from a throat that didn't belong to him anymore. I turned on my phone light. For a moment, the beam caught something at the edge of the chamber. Movement. Pale skin, a glint of metal. Trent stood there. Or what was left of him. His clothes were shredded. His face looked stretched, too thin, eyes too dark. His mouth opened wider than it should have been, and when he spoke again, the sound came from everywhere. "You filmed me." He took a step forward. The ground around him seemed to pulse with the motion, like the whole place was alive. "I didn't," I started, but he cut me off. "We keep what we are given." Then he smiled, and the walls began whispering. Dozens of voices. Men, women, children, some crying, some laughing, all repeating the same phrase. "We keep what we are given." The air turned solid, pressing against my chest. I could barely breathe. I dropped the phone. The light spun across the floor and hit something carved into the center of the chamber. A circle. Names engraved in a spiral. At first, I thought they were just random markings until I saw mine. Alex Carter. The date next to it was tomorrow's. I bolted for the stairs. But the entrance was gone. The stone above me had sealed. My flashlight flickered weakly on the ground, casting long, trembling shadows across the walls. Trent's voice echoed behind me. "You saw. That's enough." I started clawing at the wall, pounding, screaming until my throat broke. The rock didn't budge. Then a hand touched my shoulder. Cold, smooth, too heavy to be human. When I turned around, there was no one there. Just a smear of darkness shaped like a person. Its head tilted, imitating me. And then, in my own voice, it whispered, "You came back." I don't know how I got out. I woke up in my car parked miles away. It was dawn. The camera bag was in the passenger seat. When I opened it, the camera inside wasn't ours. It was old, black, dusty, heavy as stone. The tape inside was labeled in Trent's handwriting, "Return." I should have thrown it away, but I didn't. I watched it. The tape started with static, then faded to the same chamber I'd just escaped. The walls looked newer, clean, untouched. Someone was behind the camera, breathing hard. The lens panned slowly, showing 4 people entering the room. Me, Trent, Maya, Jake, all of us. The footage kept rolling as we set up lights, laughed, adjusted focus. None of it had happened, but it looked real, too real. Then one by one, each of us looked up at the camera as if hearing something. The frame shook. The light dimmed. When it brightened again, only one person was left, me holding the camera, and behind me in the reflection of the lens, something moving, something tall, faceless, made of shadow and stone dust. It leaned close to the camera and whispered, "We keep what we are given." I turned the tape off and smashed the camera. Didn't matter. The hum started again, that low, vibrating frequency that rattles your bones before you even realize its sound. And my laptop, off. Unplugged, turned itself on. The screen showed a single video file, Mausoleum 3 MP4, no keyboard input. No mouse movement. It just opened. The frame was my apartment. Current time. Current date. The camera was facing the front door, and as I watched, something on the other side began to knock. 3 times. Slow. Heavy. I deleted the file. Unplugged everything. Moved to a motel across town. But now, no matter where I stay, I wake up to the same thing. Dirt under my fingernails. A faint, sweet smell of damp stone and old flowers. And a voice in my head whispering. So softly I can almost pretend it's just memory. We keep what we are given. I've started hearing it outside, too. When I walk past mirrors, my reflection lags a second behind. Sometimes it smiles when I don't. And once in the window of a passing car, I saw the mausoleum reflected behind me, just standing there, waiting. I don't think Trent died down there. Not really, I think he became part of it. And it wants me next. Because last night I woke up to the sound of scratching beneath the bed. I leaned over the edge and saw stone. Cold. Gray stone. Carved with the same words. We keep what we are given. And in the reflection of my phone screen, I swear I saw the door opening again. This time from inside the mausoleum. Light spilling out. Something stepping through. Someone who looked exactly like me. If you ever find a mausoleum with no records, no names, no door, don't film it. Don't go near it. Don't remember it, because the moment you do, it remembers you back. And when it does, you've already been given. The first thing they told me when I got the groundskeeper job was to never dig near Section C after dark. I laughed at that. Thought it was some old superstition from the previous caretaker. Just part of the creepy charm of working at a graveyard. But now, sitting here at 3:17 a.m. with dirt under my nails and blood on my sleeve, I understand exactly why they said it. Because Grave 47 isn't a place. It's a door. And I think I've opened it. I took the job 2 months ago. I was broke, halfway through a messy breakup, and desperate for anything that would pay rent. The listing said overnight maintenance and groundskeeping. Sounded peaceful. Quiet. St. Aurelia Cemetery sat on the edge of town, fenced in by rusted iron, mostly forgotten. Only a handful of fresh burials every year. It was lonely work, but I didn't mind. There's something oddly calming about trimming ivy off headstones and listening to the wind hum through the trees. My boss, Mr. Weller, was an older man. Gray beard, slow speech, the kind of guy who calls everyone kid. He showed me around the grounds, pointed out the tool shed, the office, and the generator behind the chapel. Then he stopped near the far left section of the graveyard, the oldest one. The stones there were half buried, covered in moss. Don't bother with this side, he said. I looked at him confused. Why not? He glanced toward a tilted headstone at the end of the row. That's Section C, leave it alone after sundown. Especially Grave 47. What's Grave 47? He paused for a long time. Then, without looking at me, said, the one that doesn't stay filled. I thought he was joking. Until the first night I saw it for myself. It was around 2 a.m. I was doing a last patrol with my flashlight when I noticed something odd. A section of ground that looked freshly turned, right where the older graves were. I checked the maintenance log. No recent burials. The headstone read simply, Grave 47, no name, 1893. The dirt was uneven, like someone had been digging from the inside. The thought hit me so fast I laughed out loud just to kill the tension. Rats, I said to nobody. Just rats or coyotes. Still, I found myself filling the loose dirt back in, just in case. When I came back the next night, the grave was open again. I didn't tell Weller. He would have said I imagined it. Instead, I decided to document it. I brought my phone and filmed a quick clip. Me standing beside Grave 47 at 11:56 p.m., showing the disturbed soil. I even placed a small wooden marker, just a stick tied with red tape, so I'd know if anything shifted. By morning, the stick was gone. The dirt was smooth, flattened perfectly as if packed by a machine. But when I rewatched the video, there was something I hadn't noticed before. At EU032, the phone camera picked up a faint sound beneath the wind knocking, 3 slow knocks from under the soil. Tried to quit the next day, walked into Weller's office and told him something strange was happening out there. He just stared at me for a moment, like he'd heard this before. Grave 47? He asked. I nodded. He sighed. It's older than you think. No one's supposed to touch it. You keep filling it, it keeps opening. Been that way since before I started here. That doesn't make sense, I said. Nothing about this place does, he replied. Then softer, just do your job, kid, and leave it be. Of course I didn't the following week. Curiosity got the better of me. I started digging. Not much, just a few inches down, enough to prove the ground wasn't being disturbed by animals. The soil was dense, wet, packed with clay. No sign of tunnels or burrows. But about a foot down, my shovel hit wood. Old, splintered, half-rotted coffin boards. I cleared more dirt, just enough to see the outline. The lid was cracked open slightly, like something inside had pushed upward. Then my flashlight flickered. For a second, I thought I saw something move in the gap. The faintest suggestion of a hand, pale and still, and a whisper, too soft to be real. Stop. I dropped the shovel and ran. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that crack in the coffin, that motionless hand. Around 2 a.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. When I answered, no one spoke. Just a faint scratching sound like fingernails against wood. I hung up immediately. Turned my phone off. The next morning, the red marker stick was back. Only now it was standing upright in front of my cabin door. Planted into the soil, and tied around it was a piece of cloth, frayed, yellowed, smelling faintly of dirt and decay. I didn't go back to work that night. Weller called 3 times, left messages asking where I was. I ignored them. By the second night, guilt set in. I told myself I'd just do one more round, a final shift before quitting for good. When I arrived, the gate was unlocked. The grounds were silent, but there were footprints in the mud, fresh ones. They led straight toward Section C. When I reached the spot, my stomach dropped. Grave 47 was wide open, not like before, not just loosened dirt or shallow disturbance. This was a pit, 6 feet deep, and Weller's flashlight was lying at the bottom. I called out for him, but my voice just echoed back. Too slow, like the air itself was thinking about answering. Then I heard it. The knocking. From inside the open grave. 3 times, slow, steady. And this time, something answered from the woods, another 3 knocks fainter, farther away. Back and forth. Like a conversation. I don't know what came over me, but I dropped to my knees and shined the flashlight down into the grave. There was no coffin anymore, just a hole leading deeper. A tunnel, freshly dug, and from the dark something whispered my name. I ran. I don't remember how far, maybe halfway across the cemetery. My lungs felt like fire, but when I stopped panting, I realized I wasn't at the main path anymore. Somehow, I was standing at the other side of Section C, facing the same grave from a different angle. Only now it was closed, perfectly filled, undisturbed, and carved into the dirt at my feet like finger marks were 3 words. You keep me. I didn't go home that night. I slept in my truck with the lights on. In the morning, I drove straight to the police station. They said they'd check the grounds. When I went back later that afternoon, there were 2 squad cars parked near the chapel. One of the officers, a younger guy, looked shaken. He told me they'd found Weller's coat near grave 47. No blood, no body, just his flashlight, and a single wooden stick tied with red tape, exactly like mine. I should have left town. I told myself I would, but that night my phone turned itself on. The same unknown number. Only this time the call came with a video. I didn't want to watch it, but I did. The clip was shaky, night vision on. It showed Weller walking through Section C, muttering to himself. The camera angle kept bouncing as if someone else was filming from behind. Then he stopped at grave 47. He turned around, looking directly into the lens. Don't fill it, he said, voice low, desperate. Don't ever fill it. The screen went black for a second. Then a flash of movement, dirt falling, a hand reaching out, and finally a close-up of something that made my skin crawl, the red marker stick. But this time, my name was carved into it. I smashed the phone, deleted everything, didn't matter. That night, while driving out of town, I looked in the rearview mirror and saw the cemetery lights flicker behind me. A faint, pulsing glow like something breathing. Then, for a split second, the reflection changed. Instead of the back seat, I saw dirt. Dark, heavy, pressing in, and a hand, mine, reaching up through it. I don't know how much time has passed since. Days blur together. I barely sleep. Sometimes I wake up with mud under my fingernails. Once I found a piece of red tape tangled in my bedsheets. I keep telling myself I'm just tired, that it's guilt, hallucination. But I can still hear the knocking sometimes. 3 slow hits, always from under the floorboards. And lately, they've started to sound closer, like whatever's buried isn't buried anymore. I drove past the cemetery yesterday, against every instinct. The gates were open again, and at the far end of Section C, a new mound of dirt caught my eye. Fresh soil, fresh flowers, a temporary marker with a name. Elias Weller, grave number scratched beneath it. I think I know what he meant now, about it not staying filled. Because every time someone tries to cover it, it takes someone else instead. It doesn't want emptiness. It wants to be kept. And tonight, when I came home, there was a new voicemail waiting for me. The number was blank. The message was short. A voice I didn't recognize said, "Stop digging or it'll be your turn to keep it." Then, 3 slow knocks and silence. I haven't been back. I won't, but I can still feel it. The way the ground seemed to breathe. The way the soil moved like something underneath was just waiting for me to slip. Sometimes I dream I'm standing over that grave again. Shovel in hand, dirt piling around my ankles. And in the dream, I hear my own voice whisper, "We keep what we are given." Then I wake up almost and my hands are covered in dirt. If you ever visit St. Aurelia Cemetery, stay away from Section C. If you see a grave marked only with a number, don't touch it. Because some graves don't hold the dead. They hold the living, waiting for someone new to take their place. And if you ever hear knocking from the ground, for the love of God, don't answer. It started with the radio. Every night, right before I closed the caretaker's office, the old radio on the desk would flicker to life, just for a few seconds, whispering static. At first, I thought it was interference from the weather tower on the hill, but then I realized it only happened when I walked past the window overlooking the north side of the cemetery, the oldest graves, and the static always came with a voice. Faint, stuttering, buried deep inside the noise. It said my name. My name's Eli. I work night shifts at Marrow Hill Cemetery. Been here 3 years now. I like the quiet, the hum of insects, the creak of trees, the cold air that settles like dust between the stones. But lately it's been different. The quiet feels heavier, like it's listening. The first real sign something was wrong happened on a Tuesday. I was checking the lights along the north path when my walkie buzzed. It was empty static, just white noise, but I could have sworn I heard someone breathing through it. Then a voice. Not clear. More like words being dragged through sand. "Help. Me." I froze. "Who is this?" No response. Just a faint crackle, then silence. When I got back to the office, the radio on the desk was already on, even though I'd unplugged it that morning. The dial was fixed to a dead frequency, but the speaker kept pulsing like a heartbeat, and behind the static, that same whisper again. "Down here." I didn't tell anyone. You don't last long in this job if you start sounding superstitious. But the next night it came back, louder. This time, it said something new. Under me, I tried tracing the signal with an old scanner, thinking maybe it was coming from a buried wire or underground comms. No luck. But as I moved closer to the back fence, the noise grew clearer, and that's when I noticed it. The small stone marker half buried under leaves. No name, just a number. The same number from the maintenance log marked as unrecorded burial. I don't remember deciding to dig. It just felt inevitable. The soil was loose, easy to move, almost expecting me. A few feet down, my shovel hit something solid, not a coffin. Metal. An old radio transmitter, rusted and cracked, half buried beside bone fragments. I brushed off the dirt. The thing still hummed faintly, even though it wasn't connected to anything. When I leaned closer, the speaker spat static and then, "Eli." I dropped it and stumbled back. The voice was clearer this time, softer, familiar. My brother's voice. He died 2 years ago. Car accident. I never got to say goodbye. For weeks, the guilt ate me alive. I used to fall asleep with my phone in my hand, scrolling through our old messages, wishing I'd answered sooner. Now, here he was, whispering from a broken transmitter in the dirt. "Eli, come closer." The sound wasn't threatening. It was pleading. I picked the radio up again, heart pounding. "Adam?" Static swallowed the name, then cold. "Help me." Something inside me broke open. I told myself it couldn't be real. But the warmth behind my eyes said otherwise. I followed the sound. The transmitter led me down the hill to the old crypts, the ones sealed decades ago. The static grew louder the closer I got, until it felt like it was vibrating in my teeth. When I reached the largest crypt, the signal stopped. Then, a single tap from inside the stone door, like someone knocking. 3 slow hits. I froze, gripping the radio tight enough to hurt. "Adam, is that you?" Nothing. Then a faint whisper, "Find me." The rational part of my brain screamed to leave, but grief doesn't listen to reason. I forced the rusted gate open and stepped inside. The air was thick and wet. Every sound echoed twice. The crypt was small, just 4 alcoves, all sealed. But one of the plaques had fallen off the wall. When I wiped the dust away, I saw something that shouldn't have been there. A metal speaker embedded into the stone, old, ancient-looking, wired into nothing, and from it, that same soft hum, static. "Adam," I whispered. Trembling, the static shifted, became speech. Clearer now. "You shouldn't be here." The voice wasn't his anymore. It was mine. "Leave," it said again, exactly in my tone, my rhythm, my breath. Then the radio in my hand turned itself back on. Both voices spoke together, mine and the one from the wall, overlapping in perfect sync. "Eli, leave before you forget." I dropped the transmitter and bolted out of the crypt. When I turned back, the door was sealed again. I didn't go back for days. I tried to tell myself it was stress, exhaustion, feedback from buried wires. Anything but what it felt like. But every night the static followed me home in the walls. The shower, the hum of the refrigerator, always whispering the same thing under. On the 5th night, the signal changed. It was stronger, sharper. I followed it on impulse, barefoot, still in my uniform, down the road toward the cemetery. The gate was wide open, though I was certain I'd locked it. The path lights flickered in rhythm with the sound. Static. Silence. Static. It felt like breathing. When I reached the north fence, the ground was torn up again. Grave 47 half exposed, and the radio transmitter I'd buried was sitting on top of the soil, glowing faintly. The moment I picked it up, everything went quiet. Then a voice, softer. "Come, Eli, come see." The ground beneath me shifted. I dropped the radio, but it didn't fall. It hovered for a second, held up by something unseen, before sinking slowly into the dirt. Then the soil split, not like a natural collapse, like it was opening. I saw the outline of a hand, pale as ash, reaching through, and for a moment, I recognized the shape of the wrist, the scar across the knuckle. Adam's. I reached down without thinking. "I'm here. I'm here, I've got you." The moment our fingers brushed, the static screamed. Every frequency I'd ever heard crashed through my skull. Radio chatter, phone buzz, TV hiss, and all blending into one endless tone. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The hand gripped mine hard enough to snap bone. Then through the noise, one last word. Trade. I woke up in the caretaker's office. Morning light through the blinds. The radio sat on the desk, silent. My hand was fine. No bruises, no pain. But when I turned the dial, the frequency wasn't dead anymore. It was playing a recording. Of me. "Help me," my voice said. "It's cold, please." Over and over, they found my uniform near Grave 47 the next night. The new guy who took my shift said the radio kept switching on by itself. He says sometimes, when he walks past the north window, the static hums louder, almost like a voice trying to tune itself in. He says it sounds like me. I don't know if I'm still here. Everything feels heavy, muffled, like I'm trapped behind glass. When I speak, it comes out warped, buzzing, like my bones are filled with static. And somewhere above me, maybe in the caretaker's office, maybe inside that broken transmitter, and I can still hear him. My brother, he's calling again. Eli, come closer. I think I understand now. It was never about haunting. It was about signal. Something below the ground transmits. Something above listens. And when the connection's strong enough, one of us has to stay on the line. If you ever hear static near a graveyard, don't try to find the source. Don't answer the voice. Don't follow it down, because once you do, your body stops being yours. Your voice becomes the next frequency. And the static? It never ends. The first time I saw him, I thought he was just another mourner. It was around 3 a.m., a few weeks into my shift at the graveyard. Fog had swallowed the entire hill, turning the tombstones into silhouettes. I was doing my usual patrol, flashlight cutting through the mist, when I saw a faint orange glow near the far end of the cemetery. A lantern swinging gently in the dark. The figure holding it stood perfectly still. Too still. When I called out, "Sir, the grounds are closed." The light swayed once, then went out, and the fog filled the space where he'd been. I told myself it was nothing, maybe a hiker who'd wandered too far or a trick of the mist. But the next night, the same glow appeared, farther down the hill this time, near the old willow tree where the oldest graves sank unevenly into the soil. Same lantern, same stillness. Only this time I heard something, a low creaking like wood bending under pressure. Then faintly, a voice, "Keep the light burning." It was so quiet I almost thought I imagined it. But when I got closer, I found an old lantern sitting on the ground. Iron frame, cracked glass still warm. Inside, the wick glowed faintly, even though there was no fuel. I brought it back to the caretaker's shed, figuring it was some antique left behind from a funeral. The thing felt heavy, older than it looked. On the base, someone had scratched words into the metal. "Do not let it die." I laughed nervously and set it on the shelf. But when I turned off the lights to lock up, the lantern flared to life again, a dull, flickering orange that filled the entire room. And somewhere outside, I heard footsteps crunching through gravel, slow, deliberate, circling the shed. The next morning, I tried to tell my boss about it. He just looked at me, expression tight. "You found his lantern?" "Whose?" I asked. He didn't answer for a long time. Then finally, "People used to talk about a night watchman who worked this ground back in the 1800s. They called him the Lantern Keeper. Stayed on duty long after he should have retired, even after they stopped paying him." "What happened to him?" "He died on shift," my boss said simply. "Heart attack, they think." But the weird part was, when they found him, the lantern was still burning. That night, I decided not to go near the shed. But the light found me anyway. At exactly 2:47 a.m., the power went out across the entire cemetery. My flashlight sputtered and died. The generator refused to start. Then through the window, that same orange glow bloomed in the fog. It wasn't the soft light of a flame. It pulsed, slow and rhythmic like a heartbeat. And over the hum of silence, I heard the faint scrape of metal on stone. Someone was dragging the lantern along the ground. I grabbed my flashlight and went outside. The fog was thick, wet against my skin. I could barely see 10 feet ahead, but the sound guided me. The steady scrape of metal, the faint clink of a chain. When I turned the corner near the willow tree, there he was, the lantern keeper. His back was to me, coat long and dark, shoulders bent, the lantern swinging from one hand. The light inside it wasn't fire anymore. It was something else. "Something alive, sir," I called out, my voice trembling. He stopped walking. The air around me felt heavier, like the fog had turned to water. Then he turned, and the light hit his face. It wasn't decay or rot that made me freeze. It was emptiness. His face was blank. Smooth skin stretched where eyes and mouth should have been. The lantern's glow flickered through the thin places, lighting him from the inside like a paper shell. And when he spoke, the sound didn't come from his mouth. It came from the lantern. "Keep the light burning." I stumbled backward, nearly dropping the flashlight. "What are you—" The lantern flared brighter, and every headstone around us began to hum, soft at first, then louder, until the entire cemetery vibrated with low electric sound. I ran, didn't look back until I reached the office, slammed the door, locked it, turned on every light I could. For a moment, everything was silent again. Then the radio on the desk hissed. Through the static, That same voice, distorted now, echoing through metal. Keep the light burning. I unplugged it, threw it across the room. Didn't matter. The voice didn't need wires, it was inside the walls, inside my chest. By dawn, the lantern was sitting outside the office door, still glowing. I hadn't brought it there. There was a note tucked underneath it, a scrap of parchment, edges burned, the same handwriting as the engraving on the base. It dies when I rest, and I cannot rest. The light flickered once, twice, then went out completely, and for the first time in hours, the air felt normal again. I buried the lantern at sunrise. Deep under the willow, I thought it was over. That night, the fog came back, and with it the faint orange glow. Not one light, but dozens. Lanterns, hanging from trees, resting on graves, scattered across the cemetery like stars pulled down to earth. Each one burned with the same unsteady pulse, and at the center of them all, the keeper stood waiting. No lantern in his hand this time. Just that blank, hollow face turned toward me. His voice came from everywhere at once. You took my light. I buried it, I shouted. You can rest now. The fog thickened, choking the air. No rest, the voice said. The flame remembers. The lanterns began to dim one by one. As each went dark, I felt something inside me flicker, a coldness spreading through my chest. My heartbeat slowed to match their rhythm. I dropped to my knees, gasping, and the last thing I saw before I blacked out was his silhouette bending down, placing something against my chest, warm metal, the weight of a lantern. When I woke up, the fog was gone. Morning light. Birds. Normal silence. Except, my reflection in the office window wasn't quite right. My skin looked pale, my eyes dim, and when I leaned closer, I saw the faintest orange glow deep inside my chest. A flicker, a heartbeat that wasn't mine. I tried to quit the job the next day, packed my things, left the keys on the counter, walked to my car, only to find the same old lantern sitting in the passenger seat. Still warm, still glowing, and carved deeper into the base this time. Do not let it die. I've been trying to leave for weeks now. Every time I drive away, the car stalls near the cemetery gates. The engine dies. The lantern light grows stronger, and I hear his voice again, sometimes from the fog, sometimes from the passenger seat, soft, patient, almost kind. Keep the light burning. I don't know what the flame is. Maybe it's memory. Maybe it's souls. Maybe it's what's left of him, trying to keep the dark from swallowing everything. All I know is it's in me now. At night, when I breathe, my ribs glow faintly orange. The static hum follows me everywhere, and sometimes in the reflection of windows, I see him standing just behind me, faceless, holding an unlit lantern, waiting for when my flame burns out. If you ever find an old lantern glowing in a graveyard, don't touch it, don't move it. Don't even breathe near it, because once it burns for you, you become the next keeper, and the light, it never goes out. The first time I noticed it, I thought it was a trick of the fog. Row D, plot 19, a modest headstone cracked along the top. It had always sat a few feet from the oak tree near the edge of the cemetery. But that morning, it was closer, not by much, maybe a few inches, but enough for someone like me who knows this place like his own face, to feel something was off. I stared at it for a long time, hands stuffed into my coat pockets, cold air biting my ears. When I checked the records later, everything matched. No one had disturbed the soil, no recent burials, no maintenance orders. Still, the grave had moved. I'm Tom, the night caretaker at Rose Hill Cemetery. Been working here almost 8 years now. It's not glamorous, but it's peaceful, or at least it used to be. The quiet here has its own rhythm. Wind through dry grass, crickets, distant traffic. You get used to it. But lately there's been a sound that doesn't belong. A low scraping like stone dragging across dirt. It happens only at night, always near the same part of the grounds. Road D, the section with the old family plots, half forgotten and sunken into the earth. The second night, I went out with a flashlight and found it again. The same grave, the one with the cracked top. It had moved another few inches. The grass around it looked wrong, stretched like the earth had pulled itself tight beneath the stone. I crouched down, running my fingers over the dirt. It was cold, damp. The smell of soil filled my nose, rich, sharp, old. That's when I noticed something else. The date on the stone had changed. Yesterday it read 1918, 1956. Now it read 1918, 1955, 1 year earlier. Blinked. Rubbed my eyes, even took a picture with my phone to make sure I wasn't imagining things. But it was real. The grave was changing. By the third night, I was obsessed. I skipped dinner, stayed out there for hours. Every few minutes, I'd hear the same scraping sound on a slow, patient, like something heavy being pulled through dirt. I tried following it once, but the sound always stopped when I moved closer. And when I looked back at the grave, it had shifted again. Now almost a foot away from where it started. The dates were gone entirely this time. Just blank stone, as if time itself had been erased from it. I brought it up to my boss the next morning. He frowned, checking the records. Plot 19? That's been empty for decades. Empty? I asked. There's a stone there. He shook his head. It's a memorial marker. Never used. They ordered it before the body was even buried, but the family moved out of state before it was finalized. Nothing underneath, I laughed nervously. You sure about that? He gave me a look. Tom, the ground's been checked a dozen times. You're not digging up graves again, are you? I told him no, but that night I brought a shovel. The fog came early. Heavy, damp, muffling every sound. When I reached the grave, it was right at the base of the oak tree now. I shined my flashlight down. The ground was fresh, darker than the rest, like someone had just turned the soil. I hesitated, my breath fogging the air. Then I pressed the shovel into the earth. The dirt gave easily, too easily. About a foot down, the smell hit me. Not rot, something older, cold metal and wet stone. I kept digging until the blade struck something hard. Not a coffin, a door. It was a slab of rusted iron, maybe 3 feet wide. Bolted shut, sealed with thick nails that looked hand-forged. I brushed the dirt away and saw faint letters scratched into the metal. Do not open. My heart pounded in my chest. The grave had moved to cover this. I leaned closer, trying to make sense of it, and that's when the air shifted. Everything went silent. Even the crickets stopped. Then, from beneath the door came a sound. Knocking, 3 slow, hollow taps. I stumbled back, flashlight shaking in my hand. The knocking stopped. Then, faintly, a whisper. Tom, I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard it again. The sound of dirt shifting, stone dragging. By morning, I told myself it had to be a hallucination. Too much work, too little rest. But when I went back to the cemetery, the grave was gone. Not just moved, gone. The patch of grass where it had been was flat, undisturbed. Like it had never existed. Only the oak tree remained, and carved into its bark, deep and jagged, were 3 words. Do not open. I could have stopped then. I should have, but curiosity is poison. That night, I went back with tools, a crowbar, a headlamp, a bottle of whiskey to steady my hands. I found the iron door again, half exposed in the dirt, like it had never been covered at all. My breath came in shallow bursts. The smell coming from beneath it was stronger now. Cold, like rust and old rain. I wedged the crowbar under the edge and pushed. It didn't move. I tried again, and again, until, finally, it shifted with a shriek of metal. The sound was unbearable, like bones grinding. Then the door lifted, just enough to see darkness beneath it, and something moving. At first, I thought it was air escaping. A shadow, maybe, but then it took shape. A hand, small, gray, slick with earth. It reached for the edge of the door and began to push back. I dropped the crowbar and staggered away. The soil around the door trembled, and a low voice, hoarse, dry but unmistakably human, rose from the black. Help me. The hand clawed at the opening, nails snapping against metal. I ran, didn't look back. I called the police the next morning, told them there was an unmarked grave, possibly a body, maybe something buried illegally. They sent 2 officers and a city inspector. I led them to the spot, but there was nothing there. No iron door. No disturbed soil, just grass, perfectly flat. Perfectly ordinary grass. They looked at me like I'd lost my mind. When they left, I stayed behind, staring at the empty ground. The wind through the trees almost sounded like laughter. That night, the grave returned. In the middle of the main path this time, right where I parked my truck, the cracked headstone leaned slightly forward, and beneath the name, one which had been blank before, there were new letters carved into the stone. Thomas Gray, 1983. My name, my birth year, the rest left open. I ran home, locked the doors, poured a drink. But around 2 a.m., my phone started vibrating. Unknown number. When I answered, there was nothing, just static, then a faint, dragging sound, like stones scraping across dirt, and a whisper I'd heard once before. Tom. I hung up. Threw the phone across the room. It kept vibrating over and over until the battery died. For the next few days, I didn't go back to work. My boss left messages. The cops came by once asking about vandalized plots. Apparently, several graves in Row D had shifted positions overnight. Entire stones dragged out of alignment like something beneath the earth was pulling them closer together. I told them I didn't know anything, but I did. I could feel it. The pull. Every night, the same dream. I'm standing at the cemetery gate looking down the path. The graves are all moving, slowly sliding toward one spot beneath the oak tree, and there's a hole waiting for me at the center. On the 5th night, I woke up to the sound of scraping right outside my house, heart racing. I went to the window and froze. The ground in my front yard was shifting. The soil rippled like something was tunneling beneath it. When it stopped, I saw the outline of a headstone rising up through the dirt. The same cracked stone, Row D, plot 19, and carved into it fresh and deep were new words: do not run. I don't know how long I've been awake now. Time feels strange. My house creaks like it's breathing. The air smells like damp soil and rust. Sometimes I hear the dragging again. Faint, steady, getting closer. I think the grave wants to come home. Maybe it's not about where it belongs, but who. Maybe it moves until it finds the person who disturbed it, until the name on the stone finally matches what's beneath. I can feel it outside right now. The scraping is louder. The windows are rattling in their frames. There's dirt under the door and that smell again, cold, wet, metallic. I keep telling myself not to look, but I already know what I'll see when I do. That cracked stone, my name carved in full now. No blanks, just an ending. If you ever work in a graveyard and notice a headstone out of place, don't measure it. Don't touch it. Don't even acknowledge it. Because it's not the grave that's moving, it's the ground, it's the earth itself, shifting to make room, and once it decides you belong beneath it, you won't be able to move fast enough.